So good morning and welcome. My name is Reverend Dr. Ron Fox, and I'd like to welcome you to this Sunday celebration for the Center for Spiritual Living Space Coast. And as we do each week, I would like to say if there's anybody watching this at any time that's never been to a Center for Spiritual Living, we believe there's one God, many paths to that God, and we're here to love, honor, and support you, no matter what your divine path is. And the Center for Spiritual Living Space Coast is a safe haven for people of all beliefs and lifestyles, whoever you are and wherever you may find yourself on your journey of faith. You're welcome here. And to begin our service this morning, our practitioner Jenny Panic is going to open us with a prayer, and then our congregant Barbara Loftus is going to honor us with a reading.
So let us take this moment to come together in this now moment. As we breathe in the Spirit. The Spirit is always present. As we breathe out, we say a simple prayer of thank you. So I know that this mighty moving power lives within each one. It is everywhere. It is the fullness of who we are. And all we need to do is turn to it with a desire, with a word. We speak our word into the law, and the law responds. And we are filled with the Spirit, and we are filled with truth and love. And there is a power within us that can never go away, that is always there. It is always available. It is at our beck and call. It was born with us. It was born before we even came into existence. It is this power that is omniscient, omnipotent, and everywhere present. And this morning, I am so grateful for the Center for Spiritual Awareness Space Coast. I am grateful for Reverend Dr. Ron Fox and the truth that he speaks each Sunday as he moves us into a greater understanding of the truth of who we are. And as we come from this truth, seeming miracles happen. Seeming miracles happen. The love of God is so powerful that we just turn to it and we speak our truth. And what appears is the graciousness and the glory and the power, which comes from this power that only knows to give. And so I'm grateful for Dr. Reverend Ron Fox this morning as he turns us to this power and moves us into a greater understanding. And so I just release this treatment into the great I am that always says yes. And please say with me, and so it is.
And so it is.
This morning I'll be reading from this version of the Bible, John chapter 8, 1 through 12. Then Jesus went to the Mount of Olives, and in the morning he came again to the temple, and all the people were coming to him, and he sat down and taught them. Then the scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who was caught in adultery, and they made her to stand in the midst. They said to him, "Teacher, this woman was caught openly in the act of adultery. Now, in the law of Moses, it is commanded that women such as these should be stoned. But what do you say?" They said this to tempt him, that they might have a cause to accuse him. While Jesus was bent down, he was writing on the ground. They were through questioning him. He straightened himself up and said to them, "He who is among you without sin, let him first throw a stone at her." And again he bent down and wrote on the ground. And when they heard it, they left one by one, beginning with the elders, and the woman was left alone in the midst. When Jesus straightened himself up, he said to the woman, "Where are they? Did no man condemn you?" She said, "No man, Lord." Then Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go away, and from henceforth do not sin again." Again, Jesus spoke to them, saying, "I am the light of the world. He who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but shall find for himself the light of life."
Thank you, Barb. So the title for my message this week is Breaking the Cycle. And ideas for messages come at least to me, in many different ways. And the idea for today's message came to me. I was looking on Facebook, and one of my friends posted this, and I didn't write down which friend, but it's a piece titled "Be the Person Who Breaks the Cycle" by a lady named Lori Deschene, Deschene. And she wrote, "If you were judged, choose understanding. If you were rejected, choose acceptance. If you were shamed, choose compassion. Be the person you needed when you were hurting, not the person who hurt you. Vow to be better than what broke you, to heal instead of becoming bitter, so you can act from your heart and not from your pain." And I really love those last part, so you can act from your heart rather than your pain. Joan Borisenko is a wonderful spiritual writer. And in one of her books, she says that life issues can either divert us or help us discover our strengths. And she writes that when Nelson Mandela was in prison, he treated his guards with great self-respect. And because of that, they returned the self-respect. And when he was being inaugurated as the president of South Africa, he invited the guard that he was closest to attend. And Joan said what that demonstrates is that compassion and forgiveness can bridge great differences. And she writes about a fable there that I want to share with you. And the fable is about it happens in medieval times, and it's about a young boy who's walking in a castle and hears strange grunting. So he looks through a hole, and what he sees are two men lowering a bucket of food on a rope. And he watches them do that, and when they leave, he climbs down the rope, and what he sees are a pair of eyes looking back at him. And then he sees that the eyes belong to a really muscular man who's in a cave, in a hole. And the only thing in the hole besides the man is a large, immovable rock. And it turns out who he was the brother of the reigning king. But in reality, he was the real king, the rightful king, whose brother had disposed him and then put him in this hole and hidden him. And what he would do every day for most of the day, he would push and wrestle against this rock. And that's what forged his strength. And the fable goes on that eventually he was returned to his rightful place as king, and his brother was put in prison. And the point of the story is that there's a nobility within each of us, and that nobility grows with life's challenges. We use them to build new strengths within us. Jack Kornfield, the Buddhist teacher, goes on and makes a similar point. He says, as we grow in wisdom, we come to understand that problems and passions are our teachers, and that our anger and confusion can be transformed into strength and into clarity, which brings about awakening. And when we face our suffering, our deepest compassion comes forth, and what was once our poison becomes our ally. So I want to share with you two brief quotes from Ernest Holmes, who founded the Centers for Spiritual Living, that makes a point about love. The first one he wrote, he said, "If we would enter the sacred temple of our being, our actions must be based on love, the great impulsion of life. And the second quote, he builds on that. He says, God has given us the cup of life, which must be used as a chalice of love. The stream flows around us and through us, but the Spirit cannot drink it for us, meaning we need to do our own spiritual work. So I want to speak to you about two concepts: acceptance and allowing. And the first one, acceptance, Dr. David Hawkins writes about. And he says that in acceptance, we experience the joy of harmony. We feel secure. He said it's a feeling of caring, a feeling of warmth, a feeling of self-worth, and nothing in our life needs to be changed. Everything is perfect and beautiful just as it is. There's compassion for others. We aren't critical. We love our friends even with their limitations, and we see people as doing the best they can with what they have. And Matt Kahn writes about the concept of allowing. And he says, in allowing, our choices come from a place of love, no matter what the circumstances are. And he calls it the heart of surrender. The heart of surrender. He said we redefine the way we look at the world. And he said, ask yourself these two questions. What happens if I stop fighting the things that seem to fight with me? What happens if I stop fighting the things that seem to fight with me? And the second question is, what happens if instead of trying to change the behavior of others, I become the first one to stop fighting, even if others still fight with me? So I want to read something to you that was written by an unknown monk in the year AD 1100. He titled it Changing the World. And he said, when I was a young man, I wanted to change the world. I found it was difficult to change the world, so I tried to change my nation. When I found I couldn't change the nation, I began to focus on my town. I couldn't change the town, and as an older man, I tried to change my family. Now, as an old man, I realize the only thing I can change is myself. And suddenly, I realized that if long ago I had changed myself, I could have had an impact on my family. My family and I could have had an impact on our town. The impact could have changed the nation, and indeed, I could have changed the world. So one of my favorite spiritual writers is Kent Nerbo. He writes great stuff, and it's from the heart. And I read a story that he wrote about Francis, St. Francis. And he said at one point, Francis was away from his abbey, and one of his followers named Brother Angelo heard a knock on the door. And when he went to the door, he recognized 3 beggars who were dangerous murderers. In fact, they had been on a rampage of stealing and killing. And when he saw them, he said, so it's not enough you kill people, other people, now you've come to rob holy people? And he said to them, you're not worthy of a place on earth. Get out of here. And they left. And when Francis came back and Francis heard about it, he went to Angelo and he made Angelo bring bread and wine to the three men and to apologize to them. He said to Angelo, Jesus tells us to minister to the sick, not the healthy. If we concern ourselves only with the good, we aren't doing God's work. When we allow other people to determine our response, we become mirrors of their hate. Francis saw beauty everywhere, and that's why he wrote, "Where there is hatred, let me bring love." And one of our modern day writers and New Thought people, Joel Goldsmith, kind of takes off from there. And Joel Goldsmith said, how do we know that the Spirit dwells in us? He said, we know if we're letting go of hate, if we're letting go of jealousy, if we're letting go of envy, if we're letting go of prejudice, if we're letting go of bias and bigotry. He said, then we're making room for Spirit. As long as those qualities are present in our consciousness, we have work to do. And let me just read to you something he wrote. He said, how much truth do I know about God? I know that God is omnipresent, and that therefore all God's present is all God's power are flowing through me. Where God is, there can be nothing but good. There can be no sin. There can be no disease, death, lack, or limitation. In God's presence, there is the allness of good. What else do I know about God? God is the only power. If God is the only power, there are no powers other than God. There are no negative powers on earth, so there can be no power in this condition confronting me. God is the only life. Life is eternal and immortal, without sin or disease, without blemish. God's life is perfect. God is love, and that love enfolds me. God's love is my protection, sustaining and maintaining me. And he said the only way healing is being done is to go within, to get quiet, and allow ourselves to feel the peace that's beyond all understanding. Another one of our modern day spiritual writers is Gerald G Ampoulsky. In fact, he made his transition just a short time ago. And in one of his books, he said, why is it so difficult to see that our search for the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow is only hiding the fact that we are both the rainbow and the gold? He said the essence of our being is love, and forgiveness and love are inseparable. Forgiveness teaches us that we can choose love over fear, peace over conflict, no matter what the circumstances are. So Rabbi Harold Kushner kind of looks at all of this from a different point of view that I want to share with you. He asks the question, what does a person do with all the dreams that don't come true? Dreams about the talents he wants to share. Dreams about a career. Dreams about love. Dreams about a family. He said, some people don't let themselves be defined by failure, while others let themselves be defined by disappointment and to be frustrated by what they yearn to do during their youth. He said, what happens to people whose lives haven't turned out the way they wanted? How do they find the will to go on? And he said, the question isn't, can I get through this life without failures and without rejection? He said, because you can't. You can't. The real question is, how will you respond? What happens to us, he said, is much less important than how we respond to it. And I want to share with you the last paragraph of this chapter where I got his thoughts from. He said, if you have been brave enough to love, and sometimes you've won and sometimes lost, if you've cared enough to try, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't, if you've been bold enough to dream and found yourself with some dreams that came true and a lot of pieces of broken dreams that didn't, that fell to earth and shattered, then you can look back from the mountaintop you now find yourself standing on, like Moses, contemplating the tablets that would guide human behavior for millennia, resting in the ark alongside the broken fragments of an earlier dream. And you, like Moses, can realize how full your life has been and how richly you are blessed. So I want to end with two quick lessons, two quick stories that I think put this message together. The first one is in a book by Reverend Mary Murray Shelton, and it's a fable about a village that's known for its fine porcelain. Their urns in particular were admired around the world. And when the artists were working them, when each urn was complete, there was one final step. The artist broke it. And then the artist put it back together again with gold filigree. And an ordinary urn becomes a priceless work of art. What seemed finished wasn't until it was broken. And the second story was from a book that Jack Kornfield wrote. And it's a story about Japanese soldiers from World War II. And we've probably all read that there were times when soldiers on remote islands, Japanese soldiers on remote islands, fought on for 10 and 15 years after the war was over because they didn't know that it was over. And what happened when these people were found, Cornfield wrote, was that they weren't treated like they were fools, but a general or an admiral from the Japanese Army or Navy would get in their uniform and would go to the island. And that officer would thank them for their service and their loyalty, and then would speak to them about what their experiences were. And when they were brought home, they were given an honorable welcome. And the lesson, the point of that story is that we have judged others and ourselves for so long. We carry on battles with the past. But when we forgive and we see ourselves and others with mercy and respect, our hearts become clear. So I want to close with a piece that's titled My Oath to You, and it's written by I'm Just Being Me. And it goes, my oath to you, when you are sad, I will share your tears. When you are scared, I will comfort your fears. When you are worried, I will give you hope. When you are confused, I will help you cope. And when you are lost and can't see the light, I shall be your beacon, shining ever so bright. This is my oath I pledge to the end. Why, you may ask? Because you are my friend. God bless you. Thank you for being with us this morning, and have a wonderful week.